Tomorrow night, 48 Hours examine the mystery of two teenage girls murdered on the same California beach 6 years apart. Details of the attacks were strikingly similar. Investigators were convinced that they were connected. Decades later, DNA on one of the girls revealed two suspects. One of them worked in the police lab. Here's a preview of Richard Schlesinger's report.
In August 1978, 15-year-old Barbara Nantes was found murdered on Torrey Pines State Beach near San Diego. Barbara's sister, Sue, cannot forget that day.
My dad looked at me and said, "Your sister's been murdered." I didn't find out till years later how bad it really was.
Barbara had been camping with her boyfriend, Jim Alt. She was sexually assaulted, beaten, strangled, and mutilated. He had been severely beaten and was in a coma for days.
This was a serious, life-threatening attack.
I almost did not make it.
6 years later, in August 1984, 14-year-old Claire Huff was found murdered on the same beach. Claire's best friend, Kim Jamer, had been with her a few days earlier.
I think about her just about every day. She was my best friend.
The details of Claire's attack were strikingly similar to Barbara's. Both had been slashed in the chest, which led original investigators like Paul Ibarrondo to conclude the same killer was responsible.
How much evidence was there? How many leads?
Not any at all, really.
So the cases eventually grew cold. But in 2012, advanced DNA testing on evidence taken from Claire Huff identified two suspects. Blood was linked to a convicted rapist named Ronald Tatro. But the other DNA was linked to a man police knew, Kevin Brown. He was a former criminalist in the San Diego police lab.
In my deep core, I know he never killed anybody.
Rebecca Brown insists her husband was wrongfully accused.
My husband didn't do it. He didn't go after teenagers. I knew they were wrong.
But investigators believe Kevin Brown had a dark side. When he was a bachelor, he frequented strip clubs and liked taking risque pictures of women. The defense argues the case is built on mistakes, misinterpretation, and misinformation.
The scope of what happened to these poor young women who were brutally sexually assaulted and murdered is quite different from going to a strip club or going into a porn shop.
This is a man who didn't have a mean bone in his body.
What possible connection could a mild-mannered criminalist have to a violent, convicted rapist? Did the police get it wrong?
Richard Schlesinger joins us at the table. That's such a good tease, Richard. We were saying, it sounds like something could be a Dexter episode.
Well, that occurred to us too. You know, it's such a complicated case, and the DNA evidence you would think would help, but that just raised more questions, which we'll get into. The police were pretty convinced that these two cases were connected because of the similarities in the crimes, but wait until this unfolds.
So what's the big question here?
The big question is, how could this mild-mannered criminalist have sort of hooked up with a really violent rapist? There was no evidence that they did. The police spent a lot of time looking into that, and I'm not going to tell you how it turned out.
Maybe it was the strip clubs who like to go to the strip clubs.
I was going to say maybe they met at the strip club. Yeah.
It's interesting. Thank you. You can watch Richard's full report, Blood in the Sand, tomorrow night on 48 Hours. That's at 10/9 Central here on CBS.